And one of the things I stress on the technology side, and these are folks that are becoming software engineers, is that being a good software engineer is great, but being the person that comes out and understands and tries to figure out like how is what I'm doing impacting the business.
In this episode of Podcast Wise, Business and Tech, our host Ten Green chats with John Kreiner, a technology executive with a wealth of experience across diverse industries like healthcare, finance, and SaaS. John shares his journey from writing code to leading teams and how he's become a business aligned executive. John is passionate about building and mentoring high performing teams, and he has a proven track record of aligning tech strategies with business goals to drive innovation and create measurable impact. He joins us to share his insights on what it takes to scale organizations, foster accountability, and build a culture where both people and technology can thrive. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let's do this.
Hey, John.
Hey, Tin, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing very well today.
Awesome. That's great to hear. So now tell us a little bit about your journey into technology leadership and how you've evolved into business aligned executives.
Yeah, so I mean, I started early on in my career slinging code in the depths of the trenches, and I really enjoyed solving problems, and I wouldn't let a computer challenge beat me. And then later on in my career, I started to realize that I got a lot more enjoyment, fulfillment out of facilitating and helping other teams, leading teams to solve problems together. So, and that way, not only did I get a sense of mentorship and coaching, but I also got a sense of we could, build things at scale as opposed to just me being the individual contributor. So I moved from that individual contributor role into a leadership role, and it was pretty natural for me. I was pretty easy for me to make that transition, and I realized that success wasn't about being the smartest technologist, but about enabling others, right? So, and I worked across industries. I've been at ad tech, healthcare, nonprofit, finance, construction, and I've proved that leadership approach transfers from vertical to vertical without any, hiccups or anything like that. So, I really enjoy. I do mentoring of college students. I'm on the industry advisor council at York College of Pennsylvania. So I really enjoy not only mentoring those that work for me and those are on my team and in my organization, but also outside my organization. So that's where I'm at now. I really enjoy building teams, whether I'm starting from the ground up or whether I'm building them from scratch.
Okay, that's cool. Now, with your extensive experience, what particular experience have shaped you in the approach to building high performance team?
Yeah, so there's an in once I got into the leadership, I think the biggest influence to me was being part of a department within an organization that I was part of. And we kind of split out and we went into it was a Medicare claims processor. We went into document management solutions. We became an IBM business partner. And it was kind of like a greenfield, right? So we were building the processes, we were building the incentive structures, we were building the standard operating procedures for how do we go out and get work, how do we respond to RFPs, how do we then go meet with the customer, and then how do we actually implement the solutions that we did. And I got that a broad spectrum across the board. One of the things that really was a highlight of my career was I had decided to step away from that, and another organization who I knew the owners came in and purchased that division of a company, and they came to me and they said, John, here's the deal. Your team, the former team, won't come across unless you come back and work for us. So that made me feel really good in terms of my leadership capability, but also in terms of the value that I brought. Because at that point, I was more than just an individual contributor. I was helping the team grow and succeed. And then as I went through my career, I did some work at advertising.com, which was part of AOL. I led the project management organization there after undertaking their largest project in the company, where they were basically rewriting and replatforming their entire ad serving platform, which is what they did. They served ads, and came in and took a project that was really going south. Some of my old colleagues will remember it's Project Raven. It was going south. And I came in and brought some transparency and some reality to the project. I was told coming in, you're set up for success. This thing's going live in 3 months. And I got in, I'm like, there's no way. So, and that was a lot of transparent communication, both to the across the organization and up to the CEO at that point. So, and then further on, I went and I led a global team of 100 plus at Prometric. I'm doing the software engineering team and the quality assurance team. And not only did I lead the existing team, but I actually created efficiencies and worked with my colleagues on the tech operations side. And we built out three more centers of excellence. My teams were in Dundalk, Ireland, and Gurgaon, India. And then the tech operations were in Dundalk, Ireland, and then Kuala Lumpur. So that was soup to nuts, helping find the building, helping establish standard processes, going over there, doing recruitment activities, hiring the team, hiring the leaders, and then really watching that thing grow. And that was really, really fun to do. And then my last full-time role, which I exited out about a year ago, was being a chief technology officer for advanced metrics, case management software, SaaS platform for practitioners that are doing behavioral and mental health, really with a high focus in the child and adolescent area. And that one was it was kind of a passion of mine. I wanted to get back into the healthcare world, and I wanted to do something that actually impacted lives. And we built out a brand new platform. I brought structure, process to allow them to scale and grow moving forward. And then unfortunately, I had some challenges with my adult daughter. We had some health challenges that I had to step away and become more of a fractional leader for over the last year and a half, because of getting her back to functional again through a series of surgeries and stuff like that. But those three or four were really high impact in how I approach leadership and how I approach people. And in two of those, we actually implemented formal mentoring processes, programs where we identified leaders across the organization, and then we went out and searched for people that wanted to have a mentor. And for instance, I was mentoring somebody that was on the business side. We had people on the business side mentoring technologists, and really helping people understand not just how do I clone myself, but how do I really get the strengths that this person has and bring them out so that they can be the best person that they can be, and they can be fulfilled in what they do.
So basically, so can you say also that something like you get a different perspective from the business side versus the technology side, right? Like if you cross somebody that's more technical and then with somebody that's very business oriented, you can see the differences in how they think.
Yes.
And that because from somebody that is technical but also artistic, I can see the graphic design perspective of somebody that is in marketing, right? And versus somebody that is a IT break fix, I can feel their pain because I've done it before. So I'm like, oh yeah, I know what you mean, right? Like I'm more well-rounded because I've experienced all of these aspects of life, and I'm able to see, well, this is their pain point and this is how they're experiencing or how they might be feeling in
Right.
that situation. So yeah, that's pretty cool.
And just to add, based on what you just said, one of the things I've done a couple times, I've gone into some of the computer science classes up at York College of Pennsylvania, and I've done a talk to the students about that. There was those interviews for the internship for the first job, and one of the things I stress on the technology side, and these are folks that are becoming software engineers, is that being a good software engineer is great, but being the person that comes out and understands and tries to figure out, like, how is what I'm doing impacting the business, your value is going to be incrementally more valuable as time
Mhm.
goes on, so that in 5 years, 10 years, when the playing field is level and everybody's got the same skill sets in terms of how they can code, you have a leg up because you can understand what you're building with the business. And that's something that, I found in my career, being able to kind of jump in. I did some consulting and for a few years, being able to jump in and kind of just figure out, like, what does this business do? Like, I've gone cross industry. What does it do? And how can technology enable that? And I think that's really important. And again, going back to the mentoring, right? If you don't understand the business, you don't know how to mentor those people. And coming up through the ranks back years ago, the goal was, you just had software engineers that just coded, right? You didn't want to put them in front of the business people because you just wanted them to code this stuff. Well, as technology evolved and things got more sophisticated, I found it was really important to make sure that my teams understood, what are you doing and how does it impact? What's the end goal? Because the technology went from being a cost center to now being kind of a driver for most organizations. So I think it's really important that, anybody in the technical world, it's uncomfortable and it gets people out of their comfort zone, but they've got to understand kind of how the impact of their business is, because that's true success.
Yeah, totally agree. Now, tell me, I read somewhere that you were coaching, right? So that you coached a few university teams.
hmm
How has that helped you with your team building?
Yeah, so it's so especially in the university setting, right? You're talking about kind of raw talent, right? These are people that are really, really hungry to understand. And I've coached a couple people at the high school level as well, and really understanding. I utilize something called the Clifton Strengths. It's one of the standard assessments. But what it does, and what I like to do in terms of team building, is focus on people's strengths. A lot of times you're doing that wrong. You're not doing that right. Let's try and fix what you're doing wrong. But in reality, to build a high performing team, you've got to look at, what are people's strengths, right? And how do you orchestrate the right people in the right positions, doing the right things, so that as a team, you're successful and you're able to scale. And that's what I found really a great amount of satisfaction. And I've done it myself a couple times. Typically, I get the same top five, but as my career is progressed, I have found that there's been some tweaks in what I get back after taking that assessment. And I had one exercise where we were doing uh, high school students in the Lancaster County, Pennsylvania area in a mentorship program. We did the strengths assessment. They did the strengths assessment. I shared what I learned out of it and got out of it, but then to really talk to somebody else and say, look, what do you think about this? Right? Did you know that that's a strength of yours? And it's amazing because people are like, I had no idea. But then you
Yeah.
look back and you say, well, give me some examples where you think this might have come out. And it does. So, getting people to understand that they have strengths and that you recognize those strengths and you want to support and grow those strengths it's immeasurable in terms of the value it brings to the organization.
Yeah, it's empowering too for the
Yeah.
individual to know your strength,
Yep.
right? And that's something that
Yep.
you can leverage in not only in the current situation that you're in, even if it's for a
hmm
basketball team or something like that, but also in your relationships, in your career. Yeah, definitely. So when you inherit a team versus building one from scratch, what are the differences in the approach?
Well, obviously, coming as if you're a brand new leader, you come in, you need to establish trust. You're not going to establish trust by coming in and saying, okay, the team's gone, right? So you have to come in and you have to assess people, and you have to assess on a couple different planes. One is, you know, how are they doing? Are they in the right seat? I'm a huge fan of a book called Good to Great, Jim Collins. People haven't read it; they should go read it. It's timeless in terms of the lessons it shares. What are the gaps? And what's the morale, right? So it's important when you come into an organization to understand culture quickly. Something that works in one organization may never have been experienced in another organization. Prime example, I walked into Prometric. First thing I did is say, hey, I want to set up an all hands meeting with the entire team across the globe so that I can share what's going on, share what my vision is. And my assistant came to me and said, you're creating panic. And I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, we've only had all hands meetings when there's been layoffs. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. So,
Yeah.
again, right, I probably jumped the gun a little too fast before understanding a little bit more about the culture, but being able to then share that. And we had these things quarterly and the team loved it. Each quarter we highlighted something, but it was that opportunity to say, this is what the business is doing. And going to that, what the business is doing and understanding business perspective. When you're dealing with cybersecurity, which is huge now, right? There's so many ways, there's so many attack vectors that can happen. It's really important that if you don't understand what the business does, you don't understand how and where and what the need is to protect it, right?
Mhm.
On Prometric, we did testing and assessment across the globe, really high stakes exams. We had owned and operated centers. We had third party centers. The needs were a little different because the owned and operated, that's where the high stakes exams were. And we had to adhere to PCI standards because we took credit cards, et cetera. But just little things like our systems are so secure, but the auditor came into our Minnesota office and saw a stack this high of forms that had been faxed in or sent in via email that had credit card numbers on them. So just, physical paper. So, we think cybersecurity, but there's so much more to cybersecurity than just, making sure that data is secure and making sure that we're encrypting, in transit and at rest. It's also about the environment, the access into the facilities and stuff like that. So it's really important again for people to understand that, especially in the software engineering world, they have to understand how the code that they write could potentially open the door for a breach that could totally be ruinous to the organization, to the brand, financially. So it's really important again to have that full broad perspective. And again, people coming right out of college, you want to focus on building their tech skills, but you also want to grow them from a business perspective as well.
Yeah. So do you think also another key area that they would need to learn it would be people skills?
hmm Yes, people skills, absolutely. Soft skills, so important, especially again, when technology was just a cost center, you had people sitting in the back, system programmers, we called them, right? They just did the heavy lifting, the hardcore coding with systems, mainframes, big PCs, big servers. But again, as it's become more of a driver, it's really important to understand and to understand the perspective. I see a lot of organizations now, and I think this is a great thing, right? Go live a day in the life of your customer, right? If your customer is a driver out on the road delivering packages and utilizing your software to do that, send them out on the road with them, right? Because what I found through my career is that there are a lot of really big problems that people have just decided to stop complaining about because they feel it's never going to happen, right? So sometimes you get to see the pain that your customer feels by experiencing it with them. And again, having that aha moment when you're, sitting with a delivery driver and you say, "Oh my gosh, I know it's crazy, but and I don't work for Amazon, but the Amazon drivers, right? I see them. I live in a condo complex, and I see them zigzagging around the complex. I'm like, could somebody create software to have them go from building to building to building in a sequential order, right? Just stuff simple like that, that somebody's sitting at their desk inside, Amazon headquarters. I'm not slamming them, but, they don't see it, go out with the
Hmm.
drivers.
Yeah. So so it's like I don't know if it's still on, but Undercover Boss,
Mhm.
where the boss would come in like undercover and spend a
Oh yeah.
day or
hmm
two with the employees, and they find out what is really going on in the company. So from that aspect, from the undercover boss, just take it from that and put it in the
Yeah.
client space. Yeah, that's pretty
Yeah, well,
cool. Yeah.
not only that, right? So you talk about building teams, and right, when you inherit a team or whether you build a team, specifically when you inherit a team, I like to do what's called skip meetings, right? So you have one-on-ones with your staff, and some people are good or totally on board with them, some people are not. They can become very mundane and boring, but the goal is to have that opportunity for people to talk to you, right? It's their meeting, but the skip meeting is if you're managing, if you're leading managers or other leaders, right, you kind of want to talk to their people too. Not because you want them to squeal on the boss, right? But to get a perspective across the organization, to understand how your strategy and philosophy is getting spread out across the organization. And it's really an introspective thing, right? Because if one team is getting one message and another team is getting another message, that means I'm not delivering my message to my leadership team in a succinct and a concise manner. And I need to go back
Mhm.
and figure out how do I make sure that my message is consistent across all those managers. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. So, how do you identify the right mix of skills, personalities, and mindset when you form a technology team?
Yeah, so it depends. I haven't been done the startup except for working on my own and trying to build out some mobile applications back in 2010. But typically sometimes what will happen is you'll get brought into a situation where for whatever reason, a purchase, whatever, a team has been dissipated because either they've been absorbed into another company and at some point somebody said, we don't need these people. And then you realize, oh gosh, we got these things that we got to support. The other opportunity is one what I had with advanced metrics, where I came in, we settled the dust. We got some semblance of order with the organization as a whole and how we were delivering software and how we were approaching our customers. But we needed to build a new platform. And I knew, right? I identified there's no way we're going to do this organically. We're not going to be able to do it as we support these other products and customers. So I put together a plan of this is what it would take for us to build this new platform. And this new platform was something that the organization was trying to get done for like 4 years. And again, build a team. So we knew that we're going to build a team. We're going to, we'll ramp up. We're going to build the product. And then in 6 to 12 months, we're going to have to ramp down that team. We're still going to need some people to support it. So that's where you have to think about a blend of, full-time employees, a blend in contractors. What do you need in terms of regional perspective? Do you need people that are across the globe? Do you need people that are across the country? And then really look at, are we implementing new technologies? Okay, do we have that skill set? If we don't have that skill set, let's identify the gap and then say, okay, this is the skill set we need and put together a description so we know that we go out and get the right people. You want to keep, if you have it, some domain knowledge, right? The project that I described at advertising.com had a third party come in and they said, look, I'm going to bring a team in. We'll build this thing. Your people don't just keep the lights on and then we'll flip it over and then they can take it over. Well, they miss so much domain knowledge. And one of the things I identified immediately was there wasn't any domain knowledge. And again, back to these people are in a room, they're just coding, they're just trying to say, okay, this is what it does now. We need to make it do this, but on a different tech stack. They had no perspective on what worked, what didn't work. What are the band-aids and the patches that were put across the system, on a ongoing process for, 6 to 10 years. It's important to have, that domain expertise embedded in that system so that Now that could be technical expertise, that could be domain expertise, clinical expertise in the healthcare role, data scientists, folks that really understand what is the data telling us and how do we use the data, how do we structure the data. So there's trying to figure out all those different pieces across the spectrum, and then you identify, do I have people that already have these skills, right? And do I say, okay, I'm going to take these and put them on a new team, I'll backfill to do some of the maintenance, or do we say we need a brand new skill set? We're not going to need it long term because it's something specific to the actual framework infrastructure. And we're going to bring that person on for 6 months and then, they'll roll off and then the team will learn enough to be able to maintain that going forward. So it's really, you have to really be consistent about, what's the vision, what's the mission of what you're doing, and then define mission critical skills. What are the skills that you need to build, and then what are the skills you need to maintain going forward, and then make sure that you have a plan in place to keep those skill sets. Because the last thing you want to do too is build a team, have that team walk out the door, and then have a team left behind that doesn't know how to actually support the application moving forward.
That's really good insight. Now, tell me what role does diversity play in like of thought, experience, or even background does it play in the team building strategy?
And so I think it's a very key piece. And I don't probably look at diversity as like a chief diversity officer would, or, and, within a DEI program, although I do look at it through that lens. I look at it as I want to make sure that I don't have a bunch of people that think the same exact way, right? I love dealing with global teams. And the reason I love that is because the regional perspective of those teams, right? I've dealt with India, Ireland, Eastern Europe, Serbia, Poland, Romania, Mexico, and even Japan. When I was at Prometric, we had a team out of Japan. You just get a different perspective. And it's funny because you learn like everybody's the same, right? We're doing our job, we're smart, we're intelligent, but those perspectives are incredible. And back at ad.com, one of the things we struggled with was it was a very US focused business to start. And then when we tried to build out some self-serve tools for the kind of the long tail, it was hard to take some of our existing tools and build those out to scale globally because of the localization requirements. So that's when you get those regional perspectives to say, well, this looks great, it's really pretty, but it's not going to be functional. The same thing with, and again, I go back to if you have a leadership team or if you have a team that's full of everybody that agrees with you, you're not going to get much done, right? You want to have an environment where people can think, people can challenge, respectfully, and people value other people's perspective. And I think that's really the goal of, diversity is saying, we've got all these different perspectives, these different life experiences, and you put a bunch of those different things together and you get such a more valuable experience than if you had all the same people that looked the same, talked the same, thought the same. And I think that's, again, diversity is so important just because you need those different perspectives, and you need to be challenged as a leader. You need to be challenged, and you need to step back and say, that's an interesting perspective. Let's dig into it a little bit more, right? And then it's also, you know what? You're right. I was wrong, right? My way wasn't going to work because of the perspective that you brought, right? And the perspective on the population you're serving, the clients, the customers. So it's really, really important to understand as much as you can about your business. And 99 out of 100 times, if you don't have that diverse workforce, you're not going to be able to get that. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Now, back to mentoring.
Mm-hmm.
How do you mentor a team member to not only grow technically, but also in leadership and business acumen?
Yeah. So especially in the tech world, to take somebody from an individual contributor, the go-to guy, right? Lone wolf, the person that swoops in and I can fix everything, right? The person that maybe you don't know, and I had the situation, maybe you don't know that every morning they're running queries to make sure that things are running correctly, right? Take them from an individual contributor and make them understand, back to what I said originally, right? That being an individual contributor and solving problems is great. It makes you feel good. But you can't scale, right? Unless, we can't clone people yet. We can't scale ourselves. So being able to delegate, right, and understand as a leader, right, there are still things that I'm going to be a subject matter expert at, right? I need to make sure that I'm available for my team for those types of questions, right? So when we get work in the door, right, if I'm just taking it and doing it and I'm not delegating that out, and I've heard a lot, it's going to take me too long, more time to teach them how to do this and to, shepherd them through this than to just do it myself. Yeah, but guess what? Every time this comes up, you're going to have to do it yourself unless you teach and train people how to do it, right? Give a man a fish or give a person a fish and they'll eat for a day, right? Teach them to fish and they'll be able to eat for multiple days, right? It's the same thing. So a couple of things I do, again, I go back to the strength-based coaching, right? I use Clifton strengths. You figure out what are their strengths and you embellish those, right? You say, okay, how do I use those to grow you professionally and personally? Because I know a lot of times we say we're just trying to grow people professionally, right? We're not really, because without a personal growth, the professional growth really doesn't mean much, right?
Yeah, it doesn't
especially
sit.
as people mature from college age, college graduate, or coming out of high school and going to school at night like I did. You want them to grow, and the only way they're going to be able to grow professionally is that personal, the soft skills, if you will, right? And that's part of the personal. So I use that. Getting them to excel in something they're really good at is a lot better than having them struggle on something that they're not good at, and they may never be good at. They just don't have the natural capability. Everybody's different. Everybody's motivated different. Everybody learns different. Some people are book. They learn from a book. Some people learn from doing. Some people combination. Create growth paths, and not just, hey, this is what I want you to do. Let's work together and let's put a growth path together to get you to where you want to be. What do you want to do? Some people don't know yet, and that's great. Okay, where do you want to be in 2 years? Okay, well, I want to be a senior engineer. Okay, great. Let's figure out how to get you there, right? What's the distinguishing factor between being a junior engineer, software engineer, and being a senior engineer, and then being a lead engineer? And that's when you take those gaps that they don't have, and you work on a plan, and you formalize that plan to make sure. As a leader coming into an organization, you want to make sure you have a professional growth budget, right? You don't want to let people get stagnant. And the main reason for that is your technology moves faster than anything, right? Especially nowadays. You don't want people to get stagnant for two reasons. One is they're not going to grow within your company. Your company's not going to grow. Your organization's not going to grow. They're going to get bored, and then they're going to be stuck, right? They're going to be stuck. I don't like it here, but I can't go anywhere else because I don't have any skills that are marketable. And I think another thing too is, it goes back to the teaching them, how to fish. I like to come in. Like to set expectations, right? I can kind of identify if somebody's coachable, right? Some situations, a person has had a very bad experience in the organization, whether it's through a merger, acquisition, change in leadership. Maybe they've had 5 managers before you or 5 years before you. Some people can't recover, and sometimes they need a different team, and that's okay, right? So you also have, as a leader, you need to understand, like, if they're not in the right seat and they're not on the right bus, how do you help them get there, right? Because as a leader, you're there to grow your people. And if you know that that person can't be coached in this situation, right? They need a different, a change of scenery. It's okay to say that, and it's okay to help them get to that point. But I like to, set expectations early, give them room to execute, give them the tools, give them what they need to execute, and then really get out of the way, and step in only when it's needed, right? There are times as a leader you come in and there are some tactical challenges that have to happen, and you have to step down into the weeds to execute those technical challenges. As a leader, it's important to understand when to get back out, right? Okay, I need to jump in. I need to make sure this ship is, we're $5 million in the hole. This project is never going to end. Blah blah blah. When I walked into Advanced Metrics, we had a customer that was waiting for the software to be built, I came and I said, look, we're not going to get this anytime soon. I said, but you've already built the piece they're going to need right away, right? The pieces that we're still building, they don't need those till 2 or 3 months down the road. So if you can commit that we'll do this, I'm going to go to the customer and I'm going to say, look, we're going to get a big win. We're going to get your team into the system now so that they can actually start executing, getting their data in there. And then when they're ready for the back end, the next piece, then we'll do that. And if you trust me to do this, then we'll have a good relationship moving forward. The customer was all on board. The team had this sense of relief because they were able to kind of get the monkey off the back. And it was a quick win, right? It was a little win, but it was quick, right? And it's amazing how that just boosted morale because they just felt defeated because every day they're like, you're behind. They keep being told
Right.
this, but nobody's saying, well, let's figure out a way to get ahead, right? And you don't really get ahead, but you make it look like you do. Because you give the customer a win, you give your team a win, and you give management a win. And it allows it. And not only that, but then you're learning as you're building out the next pieces, you're learning from the data that's coming back in. So I think it's really important. And then I said it before, right? Biggest mistake is, I'm going to coach you to be exactly like me. You're going to do things the same way I do. It doesn't work, right? uh, it's it's a horrible analogy, but people say there's 10 different ways to skin a cat, right? Well, every problem there's 3 or 4 different ways, and I've never met a database management person or a senior software engineer that didn't think that their way was the best way and the only way. But in reality, right, there's multiple ways. And if you get to the end and you deliver something that works and something that satisfies the customer, something that's maintainable, it doesn't matter the method if you get to the end, right? And I've led teams, I've jumped into teams where, a bunch of software architects were then they became managers of software teams. And again, software architects, they have their own ways of building frameworks and architecting systems. And you get in a situation where they're all building the same thing under the covers, and they're all building it separate. So, ongoing, it's going to be a horrible maintenance. So getting them in a room, getting them to understand that you may not agree with Tim or Tom, but listen to their perspective and let's figure out what's the best option, right? Because I could go with option 1, 2, or 3. I'm going to make the decision that makes the most financial sense, the most business sense, and the most time sense. Again, it's the hardest thing to do when you delegate and you learn how to delegate and you move from that individual contributor is they're not doing it
Yeah.
the way I would have done it. Well, that's okay. Did they get to the end? Does it work? Right? Is it functional? Is it secure? If all those answers are yes, then they did it the right way.
Yeah.
And they learned it along the way.
Yeah. I think it's also a thing about control,
Yeah.
like having
Yep.
the sense of I need control about
Hmm.
for this particular project or need control over my team or something like that, where it becomes more managerial versus leadership, I believe.
Yeah. And a lot of that control comes from the perspective of self-worth, right? Well, if I'm not doing it, I'm not worth as much because I've always been that guy. Well, and that's where you really have to teach individual contributors. And there's some people that they just don't want to do it, and that's fine. But if you want to go into that in leadership management world, you got to teach them the value of delegation, and you got to have examples of how it's going to be better. What's the end going to look like? And not only that, but the understanding that as an individual contributor, it's all about what you do is your success. As a leader, it's what your team does that is the measure of success. And in companies where they have, bonus structures and stuff like that, and it's based on personal goals, some of that's the personal goal. Like, you got to learn how to delegate because when you do that, it's more valuable to the organization because we're going to be able to get more stuff through the pipeline.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, tell me, how do you instill a culture of accountability and ownership without micromanaging?
So part of that is making sure that it's very clear, going back to security and risk, right? Making sure it's very clear that you're accountable for this particular thing, right? And understanding that if you take a risk that is, I'll say it, beyond your pay grade, that could detrimentally impact the organization. I had a situation where the CTO who I reported into went to one of my managers and said, "Hey, can you make this change in our network in Japan? It needs to go in tonight." Sure. Great. Next morning, all hell broke loose overnight. The whole network came down. I brought them into my office and I said, "What happened?" Well,
Hmm.
CTO came to us. I'm not going to mention names. CTO came to us and said, "I need this." And I said, "Okay, great." And we could do it, but we couldn't test it. We weren't going to be able to test it. I'm like, "Okay, did the CTO know you weren't going to be able to test it?" No, we didn't tell him that. He needed it. He's the CTO. I'm like, "But do you think he would have made the decision for you to do it had he known you weren't going to be able to test this thing that could potentially break while all of us in the US are sleeping?" Well, I didn't really think of that. So, that's another part of, accountability is making sure people understand that I'm accountable, but that doesn't mean that I just do things because, you know, I'm accountable for getting stuff done, but I need to make sure that my stakeholders, including my boss, the CTO, understand the parameters around that. Same thing with, hey, the CEO comes to you and says, "Hey, can we get this new feature put in?" Sure, absolutely. You're the CEO. Get whatever you want. Well, the CEO doesn't know that if I implement this feature, this really high priority customer implementation is going to get delayed. If he doesn't know that, he's great until he finds out that the customer implementation was delayed. Accountability is all about understanding kind of where that line is. Right? I give the analogy to my teams, right? There's a basketball in the middle of the court. And if everybody's just standing around looking at the ball and nobody picks it up, nobody's accountable, right? So I want everybody to say, hey, I'm going to grab the ball. I may not be the person that can do something with the ball right now, but I'm going to find the person, right? So that's a little bit of more informal accountability, which is let's not leave the ball on the court, right? And there's a lot of people will just say, you know what, I'm just going to do my job. That's their job. They should pick the ball up, right? Well, okay, maybe you need to pick the ball up and take it over to them and say, hey, can't you do something with this ball? So it's really important to understand that. And if somebody's going to own something, you got to let them know that, right? Had a situation where one of my senior managers came to me and said, we're supposed to deliver this feature next week. We're not going to make it. Okay. I said, okay, let's go to your office. Let's sit down and let's look at the plan. And we walked through it. I said, okay, what do you need? How much more time? And we probably need 3 weeks. I said, okay, in 3 weeks, you're going to be able to deliver no matter what. Well, we better make it 4 because there's just unknown. Okay. All right. Here's the deal. I'm going to go to leadership and tell leadership that we're going to be delayed. I said, but it better be good. You own this. It better be deployed and it better be quality because in the end, if you deploy 4 weeks late, but it's good, it solves the problem, nobody's going to even remember that it was late a year down the road. But if you deliver in 4 weeks and it's garbage, people are going to remember that, right? So again, it's that, it's almost, it's a challenge, but letting them know, like, I'm doing this for you, own it though. Like you've got to deliver. And they got to know that they got to do whatever it takes to do that, right? But setting those, that ownership early, and then it's all about the outcomes. If you can do it in 3 hours, great. If it takes you 10 hours, great. If you get the outcome I need before the due date, I don't care how long it takes you.
Yeah.
I don't need to see in the office 20 hours a day knowing that this is a big deal. I just want you to get to the outcome.
Yeah. Yeah. So we talked a little bit about the accountability thing. In the cybersecurity space, we say that everybody is part of the cybersecurity
Yep.
posture, right? Like
Yep.
everybody is, if please don't click on, the suspicious link, don't do this, don't do that in the cybersecurity awareness training. So how do we give them more agency in that?
So it's definitely important that people understand their role in security.
Mhm.
I think it's important that one is a lot of organizations, they do annual security training. I think annual is a little too long, in my opinion, right? I think you need refreshers throughout the process. I'm really excited for, AI now because AI, you can put your standard operating procedures, your policies, all your security practices, you can put it in a language model and you can have an agent that they can just query and say, hey, what do I do in this situation, right? So I think that there's a lot of opportunity for us to use AI so that people can keep up with that. You can't just check off boxes. I work for an organization that every year the cybersecurity training was exactly the same, right? And everybody knew that if I got 50% through the video, I could click next and answer the question. You don't want that. You want to be able to switch it up. You want to make it relevant. So part of that is really making things relevant, understanding, if you can put real life type scenarios in so they can understand that, hey, if I did this in my company, this is what would happen. In the healthcare space, HIPAA is really, really stringent. In cybersecurity and software engineering, there are good security practices. There is what's called the OWASP Top 10. These are the top 10 things that impact security within a platform, a software platform. And they're just things that it's just good coding practice. But there's also other things you can do as a leader to make sure that there's checks and balances, right? As technology has evolved, and you have DevOps, which is delivering continuously, there are things that you can put in your DevOps pipeline to check for security holes, security vulnerabilities. And it's important that if you can, and you should be able to, because it's really important, you need to be able to implement that type of stuff so that you can catch things before they are actually out the door. Um, and for a lot of people, it's difficult to be able to convey that to leadership because you have to be able to put it in perspective of the business, right? You can't just say our technology could get hacked. You have to say, if this goes out the door, if we don't spend this money and this goes out the door, there's a chance that we have a data breach, and that data breach could bring on reputation damage, cost, fines, providing services for customers, identity theft services. So you have to be able to put anything you do from a technology perspective, you have to be able to put it into the
The
perspective
business
of
term.
business.
Yeah. So it's like if you get a ransomware, especially in healthcare, the one of the most prevalent threat is ransomware, right?
Hmm.
And it's never really just the cost of the ransom.
Hmm.
There's more to it, right?
Yeah.
There's the cost of recovery, the cost of the patients if the machines, the IoTs and the laptop that is connected to all your data is not available, then the patient is at risk. So there's more cost to just money. There's lives
Yeah.
at stake at that point, right? And
Lives. Yep.
especially in health.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. And if the brand is damaged and you can't then service those clients, it's double whammy, right?
Then you just file for bankruptcy at that point because no longer have clients. You no
Yeah.
more money coming
Yeah.
in. So
Yeah.
eventually will have to dissolve. So how do you anticipate the future of technology leadership affecting how teams are built and mentored?
Yeah. So I think we have to be thinking about AI, automation, global teams, and we have to think realistically about AI. And we have to get past the hype, right? It's not. People could say it's going to be able to code software, but there are a lot of really talented senior lead, mid-level and software engineers that have spent a lot of time not just writing code, but troubleshooting code, debugging code. We have to be very, very careful that we don't replace good quality software with stuff that gets out quick. And
Right.
that's been the case from day one. Right? We can get stuff out the door, right? We don't test it. Okay. We throw it against the wall. A lot of startups do that, right? We're going to test it. We're going to throw it against the wall. If we have bugs, we're going to fix it overnight. We're going to push it out the door. But we really need to think about what are the things that AI can help us with, right? Again, going back to pipelines, DevOps pipeline, Dev security ops pipelines, right? There's a lot of things that we can use AI for in those pipelines to help make sure that we're actually delivering a good product, right? There's things that we can automate that we had to do manually before now that are going to help us get to market faster. But we're going to need leaders who can connect the human talent with tech in a way that scales. It's all about scaling because the faster technology moves, the faster people are going to expect it to scale. But also, the more people utilize technology, the more demand there's going to be for automating, right?
Hmm.
I don't want to stand in line at the checkout register at the grocery store. I want to do my own. Okay, great. We've created that. That pendulum is probably slipping a little way back because people are like, wait a minute, I like talking to the register cashier, right? Mentoring is going to be important too, right? Especially teaching adaptability. So it's not just the tools, right? And I always say, if you're a good software engineer or software developer, the syntax of the different languages, C sharp, Java, Python, that's not hard to learn, right? If you have that mind, but really thinking about how do I adapt the technology for what I need to do, right? How do I use the technology to solve the business? How do I understand what the business wants versus what they're asking for, right? Those things are really, really important. And I guess if I could give kind of advice to aspiring leaders, I would say just don't just build teams, build people. Because if you're just building teams, that means you're going to probably have a lot of um, turnover, right? Because you're not growing the people. Tech changes really fast, extremely fast right now. So investing in people creates a more lasting impact than just building a team to do X, Y, or Z. That makes sense. It's all about mentoring and coaching and being able to give people the runway. I always say, I go back to Good to Great, Jim Collins. It's about being a servant leader, right? Your job as a leader is not to take all the credit. Your job as a leader to make sure that the team has what they need to accomplish the goals, right? Because if they do that, then you're successful. And it doesn't matter if you get like, a party or hooray or extra bonus. What matters is you're delivering for the company. I also say that we've kind of lost the loyalty thing. And it's been dissipating for a long time now, but I always look for, no matter what company I'm in, in my stage of my career, I look for the mission of an organization now more so than the technology or the team. But you want to find people that are passionate. They may not be passionate until you get them, you get them excited. So that goes back to how you mentor and coach them to be excited about what they do. If they see hey, I wrote this piece of code, I have no idea what it does. Well, if they see that, oh my gosh, that clinician was now able to quickly identify that patient had a challenge that they weren't going to be able to get over without some sort of intervention or without, give them the tools to understand that the model that they're implementing to treat this person is working. 9 times out of 10, they're going to they'll be passionate about what they do if they understand the impact.
Yeah. So knowing what they're doing is good because like I remember when I was doing the break fix time of my IT career, I always felt some sense of accomplishment whenever I fixed something
Mm-hmm.
because I knew that I was helping the individual to move forward in their job, right? Like for me, it was my impact. So I was able to see live, oh, okay, well, I fixed their printer and now they're able to print.
Yeah.
So they're able to move on and not stay stuck wherever they are or doing something else that they should be doing later on. So that's something that I really liked doing when I was doing break fix. I would say that in my cybersecurity career, I was more like pushing paper, right? It's like policies and stuff like that. And I didn't see as much impact. The impact, I didn't see it, but I knew of it, right? I knew the mission because I used to work at USCIS. So that was like a mission that I was totally for because I'm also an immigrant now,
Yep.
a
Yep.
citizen, but I
Yep.
knew the mission at heart,
Yeah.
right? So I knew that I was helping that mission move along. So that was something that
Yeah.
I believed in, right?
Yeah. I was just going to say a lot of people kind of got into technology back in the day because there's a lot of money in it. It's the
Hmm.
wrong reason, right? Anything you do, I told my kids, as long as you enjoy what you're doing, you'll never work a day in your life, right? So find something that you're passionate about that you really enjoy. Um, and if it's technology, if you love coding or if you love fixing problems, it's great. But it's even better if it's for something that you really believe in, right? And you're passionate about. So it really need to get people passionate about what they do. And I think that, the productivity would go up no matter where they work, right? Or they're working from home, remote, or whether they're in an office, right? Give them some passion, give them something to be excited about, and they'll perform.
Yeah, I agree. To finish off, I usually ask this question to every guest of mine.
Hmm.
Um, so if you had a, wow, I asked this question to everybody and I'm like drawing blank right now. Okay, focus. So if you had a superpower,
Hmm.
okay, what would it be? Real, like from Marvel, DC Comics, or like a super invented one that you just came up with? What would it be and why?
I would love to be able to time travel for a couple reasons, both future and back. I'd love to be able to go back to my earlier self and tell me some certain things, right? But of course, we all want to do that. But I'd love to be able to see what's the future, right? I go back to, when Back to the Future was made, and they went into 2015, and we got to 2015, and we were advanced, but we weren't what that was, right? So it'd be cool to
Yeah.
see, what does that future look like? I want to embrace technology, but I also understand that technology can be detrimental. So I want to make sure that, I would love to be able to move forward or even move back a few years and change some things to say, maybe we should have done it this way.
Okay.
So that would be my superpower, time travel.
It's a cool superpower. I think I would, if I had the superpower for time travel, I don't know if I necessarily use it to go back to change anything, but I think it would be more to observe how my parents or my grandparents
Mm,
lived,
that's a
right? So
great,
like
yeah,
how did I become me,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
But not with just me, but with how my parents were raised, how my grandparents were raised, and then go back. And then for future would be the kids, right? The grandkids and the grandkids. So that's how I would use it.
Yeah. Sometimes I think, and my kids can't believe that, when I started working, we didn't have email, the internet, or cell phones. And I go back and I'm like, sometimes I'm driving and I'm talking to my wife on the phone. We could have never done this. If we were stuck in traffic, we were stuck and
Yeah.
we couldn't say anything, right? So it's, and again, amazing that technology has taken us to a point where we can do that. Um, I hope for our sake that we don't eliminate human interaction, right? And not just on a screen, right? Because I think that inherently we are built to interact and we thrive off of that. I think technology, if we can throttle technology to do the things that it can do well without taking away the personal, right? Like I don't know about you, but personally, I know we do a lot of CGI movies, but I don't want to see a fully AI movie when I go, right? I don't want to see AI generated characters because I love the acting, right? I love the fact that actors have this gift, right? And I don't
Hmm.
want to take that gift away. And back in these, right? I think the music industry had a similar, fork in the road where, you know, we had when the internet, probably the 90s actually, the internet came about. You had Napster, you had this music sharing, and you were basically seeing that musicians and artists were seeing their livelihoods disappear. And
Hmm.
I don't think we want to do that, especially on the artistic side, right? The creative side, because there's too much good that comes out of creative. And I'll also say this, I've been a huge data fan my entire life, right? I love data. I love manipulating it, querying it, updating. We have to be careful with AI and large language models that we don't let them organically grow internally by themselves, right? We need to make sure that there's quality assurance, governance around that so that we're having quality checks and balances. Because once something is learned in a model and an algorithm, it's going to be hard to get that back later, if that makes sense. So, quality checks, right? Okay, we have this automated process. I'll give an example. I shipped a phone to my son in Orlando, Florida from Bel Air, Maryland, and it took 2.5 weeks to get there because it was stuck in the Orlando U.S. Postal Service distribution center, going around on conveyor belt, getting scanned on this machine, and instead of dropping into the bucket for his zip code, it kept going.
Oh wow.
2.5 weeks. And I'm like, that's where, and the postmaster told me, she's like, since we fully automated everything, things take longer because before somebody would see it and say, oh, let's just throw it in there, right? Now they just throw it
Hmm.
back on the conveyor belt and it goes around again. So,
Oh,
that's one of those things where we got to be careful that we don't automate ourselves into bad situations.
Yeah. Trust
Yeah.
but verify
Yep.
is
Absolutely.
what I would
Yep.
say.
Yep.
And also in what you were saying about, AI movies, I also like the performance from an actor, right? Like how they could perform and how they could change how they feel
Hmm.
and show it to the public. That's why I love theater, right? Like going to the theater is something that is totally different from going to the movie theater.
My favorite was has always been Les Mis, and I've seen it a couple times on stage. And the movie was great, but seeing it on stage, it's just incredible. I
Yeah,
agree with you. Like,
I saw it
there's
too. Yeah.
something about seeing people live, and doing what they do. It's just incredible.
Yeah, totally agree. Well, I thank you so much, John, for
Yeah,
joining me
thank you for
today.
having me.
Yeah, it was great conversation, and I hope to talk to you soon.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you, guys. Bye.